Just 12 years ago, Eileen Price had an idea for a day camp in the middle of downtown Atlanta. And in just a few years, with focus on branding and quality programming, she now has 750 lucky campers choosing electives every day and having the time of their life. Her story and her camp are wonderful, and I'm truly inspired by Eileen and what she has created. This is the Day Camp Pod.
This is the Day Camp Pod from Go Camp Pro, bringing you the best ideas, strategies, and discussions in the day camp industry. You can find our show notes at daycamppodcast.com.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source for recreation solutions that will ensure that your camp thrives. Explore their website today at CRS4Rec. CRS is serious about fun. Scheduling shouldn't be so difficult and take as much time as it does. Come check out Camptivities to learn all about their scheduling tools, and they're specifically designed for camps by camp people. Save time, get rid of the mistakes, and get back to enjoying your summer. Find out more at camptivities.com. Let me tell you about CampMinder, the #1 camp database in the world. It has the most robust offerings of service features found anywhere. Every feature works together to create a full, seamless system that helps your camp office run more efficiently while giving your camp family state-of-the-art communication and financial tools. Check out the details at campminder.com.
Welcome back to the Day Camp Podcast. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District in Crystal Lake, Illinois.
And today we are joined by the one and only Eileen Price from Camp in the City, from Atlanta, Georgia, too. Love Atlanta, Georgia. So what's the weather like there in Atlanta right now, Eileen? Well, we're freezing our butts off in the north.
Okay, the weather today is actually gorgeous here in the ATL. It is like a crispy 60 degrees, feels like a nice fall day where you only need a short sleeve shirt and a little jacket.
Yeah, you're practically in California without the wildfires and the earthquakes.
Yeah.
Great food in Atlanta, I just got to say. I have a good friend that lives down there, and I know that every night I'm in Atlanta, I'm going to have unbelievable food. It is quite the place scene.
It for sure has become.
And interestingly, a lot of people that live in Atlanta, a lot of people have moved in there the last 20, 30 years, and yet not the biggest day camp world, right? From what I am told, a lot of YMCAs, a lot of JCC kind of things, but not really, hardly any private camps, right?
Yeah.
Land of opportunity.
Yeah.
So I was reading your bio on something. I think it was when you were speaking at a conference, and it told a little story about how you sort of started the city camps. So I'd love for you to tell a story. It has something to do with your daughter not wanting to go to sleepaway camp.
Yeah. Okay. So the story is that we had 4 children in 8 years. And my husband and I both were sleepaway camp kids our whole lives. We went to the same sleepaway camp. My parents went to that camp.
You could give them you could give them a promo. What camp is this?
All right, fine. It's Camp Barney Meadows in Cleveland, Georgia. My uncle was the director there, and we were just like gung-ho overnight camp people. And so I always assumed my kids would be the same. And when it was time for my daughter, when she was like 7, to go to sleepaway camp, she was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And I was like, just try it for 1 summer and see what you think. So when I sent her for 2 weeks, we sent her up to a camp in Pennsylvania with some of her friends here. And when I picked her up, she had been crying for 2 weeks. And I was like, this isn't good for your development, for your identity, for anything. I'm like undoing the magic of overnight camp. Let me think about that. So at the time, I was working for Bernie Marcus, doing some of his Jewish philanthropy at the time. And I would always joke with them that philanthropists were giving all this money to overnight camp, but nothing to day camping. And like, when I did more research, I realized that 90% of kids don't go to overnight camp. So, and my daughter was going to be one of them. So I thought about like, why can't we replicate the overnight camp model and the day camp setting, giving like connection and all the experiences you have at overnight camp, but allow the kids to sleep at home in their bed, really extending the experience to their families and talking about their day and growing with the families versus it being an away experience.
So really, the lay of the land across the country, right? Would you say 99% of Jewish day camps are JCCs, right?
Yes, for sure. For sure, because it's very hard. Nobody thought of an independent camp that it would Usually camps come from generations of a YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, JCC, etc. But I felt like I could turn the model on its head. And we started an independent a Jewish day camp that has gone from 60 campers our first summer to 750 campers in just 13 summers. So clearly there's a need for
that is for sure.
something that doesn't require connection to anything else. You can just be a camper and go to this camp and feel immediate community.
Oh, that is really tremendous. So tell us how, all right, so you had this idea. Now what? How did because Eileen, just so you know, we've done a few episodes this season, sort of like first time founder episodes with people who have taken the initiative and found the courage and the chutzpah to do this. So what I find interesting is, all right, so then what? Right? Because there's a lot of people that would be like, it would be great to run a camp, right? But it's hard to put one foot in front of the other and actually make it happen.
So I remember actually where I was sitting. My husband and I had taken the kids on vacation for spring break, and we had just had our fourth baby. And I remember saying to him, I think I'm going to start a camp. And he was like, you're going to what? I was like, we're just going to start a camp. How hard could it be? Literally. And he was like, I think it's going to be hard. I'm like, nah, I have 4 kids. I can probably do anything.
You are already a camp director, is what you should say.
Yeah, exactly. And I joked with my friends, like, you all have 3 or 4 kids. If you all just send your kids to the camp, that'll be like a big play date.
Bam.
So, yeah. So I happen to live on the Emory University campus. And I went to Emory University, and I was like, well, a mile down the road, there's a whole university that's vacant in the summer. I'll just go pay market rate, use their facilities, and kind of see what happens. And that was our first summer in 2012. Actually, today I ran into somebody who was one of our first campers. And I was like, it's so good to see you. Do you remember me? And she's like, in the city? And I said, yes. She goes, I still remember it was my favorite camp ever. And I said, do you want to be a unit head this summer? She's like, I'm graduating from college. I'll call you later. So that made me feel good. But basically, I just went down the street, said, what do you charge? Let me do it. And in hindsight, it was crazy. We rented 3 fraternity houses. And
fraternity houses?
Yeah. And we
wow, is that smart?
And we had like each age, like kindergarten 1 and one of them, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then as we grew, we just got more houses, fraternity houses, all smelled like beer. It was sticky, but it didn't matter how dirty the kids made it. And then we would go swimming at the Emory University pool and use all their gorgeous athletic facilities. And we were there for about 4 summers until we got too big and had to move off campus. But running camp out of a frat house is actually amazing.
Well, they have a kitchen, that's for sure.
They have kitchens, they have everything and more.
All right. So hold on. Let's just backtrack a second. All right. So you convince the people at Emory University to sign this contract with you.
Yes.
Okay. That's great. Now you're having a camp and you're going to have a handful of kids. How do you go from a handful to a few dozen? Like what was that next step with you to actually get campers of people you didn't know?
Okay. So the first summer was a lot of just word of mouth, and it was just 60 kids. And I think 3 of them were mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually hired a young couple who had just gotten married, who had met at some camp up in the Poconos, was looking to relocate. And I was like, I can do all the marketing, the back end, but you have to make the product amazing. And so we worked together, and they actually moved to Atlanta, and we spent a couple of years together building this brand. And so the brand really became Camper Choice and Camper Autonomy, which at the time, 13 years ago, was like a crazy concept that children should have autonomy and how they spend their day. And we implemented Camper Choice. So they're walking all around Emory University, doing whatever activities they picked. And it just started catching on. People were like, wait, I hear that my friend's kid is happy at your camp, and I'm going to this other camp, and my kid won't get out of the car. So the magic sauce just became like seeing the whole child, seeing the whole counselor. We very much focused on the staff being happy. And I think you kind of have the same philosophy that when the staff is happy, the campers are happy. And that was also like a novel concept at the time. We also just continued to double down on things we were doing right. And as we're like flying the ship, we were like, that's not working. We're not doing it anymore, because it was a new product. And so we didn't have to be like, well, we've always done it that way.
Yeah. That's so
So
nice
like,
to be able to say that.
it's amazing.
How many people are jealous of us that we are allowed to say that? That is so
Yeah.
nice.
Even now, that's still our philosophy. Like as we're running at
Should be.
speed, it's like, if that
Always.
didn't work, can it? Pull in the
Yeah.
stuff that's
No, I
working.
have a pin hanging on my wall right in front of me here, and it's a pin. It says, "But we've always done it that way," with like the Ghostbusters thing through it, you know? Because a lot of people work at camps that have been around for 50 years or 100 years or whatever, and they just sort of get stuck in that mentality. So that's great to always have that,
Yeah.
no doubt. So can you tell what? First, we're going to take a quick break from one of our wonderful sponsors, and then we're going to find out a little bit about your program. Okay, because I'm very curious about this choice-based independence thing for 7-year-olds.
As a camp director, you're a leader of your camp and a pillar in your community. When your customers put tremendous trust in you, CampMinder's powerful management software tools deliver the day-to-day task support that helps you make every touchpoint moment memorable and every summer stellar. CampMinder has the most user-friendly platform for both your staff and your parents, and is backed by a team of crafty engineers and customer service associates who are constantly thinking of ways to optimize your camp's database, communication, and financial management. With state-of-the-art app for your camp families and an API available for third-party softwares, CampMinder is always evolving elite summer camp software. Check them out today at campminder.com. Scheduling affects every camper and every staff member's summer. It's easy to make mistakes and it takes a ton of time. Bottom line, scheduling is hard, but it doesn't have to be. Let Camptivities help you create a balanced and engaging schedule without the mistakes, without those long days and late nights. Camptivities does auto-scheduling, camper scheduling, group scheduling, elective scheduling, manual adjustments with over 60 different reports and tons of customizable settings and so much more. Now is the time to find a better way to schedule this summer. Don't wait. Next summer will be here before you know it. And there's time to do it now. We'd love to show you the next big thing at camp, so visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat. Let them help you get away from your desk and get back outside with those kids at camp.
All right, we're back. So I'm 7 years old. Okay, I sign up for your camp, Eileen. Okay, I'm put into a group, I would assume. Am I put in a group, or am I just with all 7-year-olds? Like, how's it
No,
work?
no, no.
Explain to me how this
Okay.
works.
So we have rising pre-K. So if you're 4 years old, you're kind of in the
Yeah,
4-year-old unit
that's when
and you're
we.
just
Yeah, that's what I said too.
doing whatever your counselors are telling you to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Getting the handle of camp. You've come from a preschool. You're used to everybody telling you what to do. So you're adjusting. But when you're going into kindergarten, you're in a kindergarten bunk, often with some friends who you've made from camp the year before, or your buddies who are going to school with you. And we have about 18 kids and 4 counselors in each bunk. And then every morning when the campers get to camp, their counselors have been given the 20 options of activities we're offering that day. And they write it on the board. And the counselor's job, depending on how old you are, as the counselor, your job is to help the children understand what are the activities, what might be happening in each activity, and to pick an activity. So as you can imagine, at the 5 and 6, it requires a lot more staff intervention, trying to help them make an independent decision. And what we find actually is children are like, what do you mean I get to choose? Like, I get to
Sure.
pick? And we're like,
Right. We
yeah,
don't get that in our regular life. It's true.
ever. Nobody ever asks them, what do you feel like doing? So it brings everybody like so much joy. And then the counselors basically line up in the hall and say, okay, if you want to go to basketball or this or that, come with me. The counselors take them and the counselors assist in each activity and are responsible for any behavior stuff, restrooming. And also the staff's job is to participate in the activity so the children can
Mhm.
participate as well. What we found post-pandemic is a lot of kids didn't know basic things, like what happens in woodworking. They never were exposed, or what happens at bicycle riding. So that's been like a big learning curve for us to like re-engage children into basic things that people used to do pre-pandemic. But basically every hour they get to pick another activity. In between there's snack and there's canteen and there's rest hour and there's swimming and all the things. But in the city, you just see all these kids in between, activities, just hundreds of them moving around at campus. It's like, where are they going? It's like, they have autonomy. They're going there and then they'll meet their counselors back there.
Okay,
And
so
they're
they
both.
were in this centralized spot. I love this stuff. All right, so
Yeah.
I like to get into the minutiae here. So they're in this centralized location, and they're splitting up. The counselor's like holding up a sign that says basketball
Yep.
or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then they split. Now you're telling me, first of all, this is a daily thing,
Every day,
every
every
day,
hour,
every period, right? Because how many
every period
periods of
for
this do we
4
have?
periods a day, 4 to
4
5,
periods for
depending on
every
the
age
day.
group. So no matter if you're
Every
4 or 14, it's 4 periods.
same schedule. Yeah.
How long are they? An
So
hour?
Okay. So what we do is the first period is an hour 15. The second period is an hour.
Mhm.
Then you have lunch, whatever. Then the fourth period, I think, went down to like 15 minutes and then 40 minutes because we found that their attention is much less in the afternoon. And so we still want to like get them the activity, but not overwhelm them. So, and
So-
remember, in the South, it's 115 degrees every day. So they're tired.
So I love this that they can make really good relationships with 4 counselors instead of just one. And I'm wondering, do they start off kind of sticking with whatever their counselor's assigned to just in the beginning because they probably feel like, okay, I'm comfortable with this one now. But then do the counselors decide, hey, we've got to switch this up so that they are getting more exposed as it goes? I mean, how does that usually play out? I love this.
Okay, so what we find is the campers after they're 5 know how to work it in the city. And if you bring a new friend, it's like, let me explain to you how this works. So like, it's really just the 5-year-olds that we have to train basically.
Sure.
But at the beginning, they're timid. They're doing what their friend picks or what their counselor picks because the counselors are not assigned. They have to assign themselves based on the ratios of where the campers are going.
Okay.
So that's another thing. I like to keep everybody in motion of making quick decisions. So like if, for example, they're walking a bunch of kids to basketball and they see that one of their friends from another cabin is like going to Krav Maga, they might be like, wait, I made a mistake. I want to go there. And it's like, okay, hold on. Let's document it. Let me put it in the spreadsheet. Okay, you're taking that kid. Awesome. Have a great time with Sally. Sally's going to bring you back to us at the end of the activity.
How are you documenting it and putting it into a spreadsheet?
We have everything on a Google sheet that the staff uses on their phone. This summer, we're actually going to be tracking it through Campminder. So, but last summer, we've always just done it through Google and they just like click, here's who's where.
Mhm.
So if we needed to find people, we would know where they were.
So I'll be curious to see how you do it with Campminder because
Yeah, we're trying.
Kind of program.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's just kind of like how it works. And as they get more and more comfortable, even by like Tuesday or Wednesday, they don't care where the counselor's going. They care which activity, who's teaching the activity. So like the specialists have to kind of sell themselves to the campers. So a lot of times I encourage the specialist during carpool to walk into each room and be like, hey, today in basketball, we're playing whatever, or we're doing this, or we're doing that. I keep saying basketball because they all love sports, but it could be any sport you think of, any art, tech, cooking, anything you can think of, we do.
All right. So that hour, 15-minute period is over. Then what? Are they all going back to
Then-
the centralized point?
They all go back to their centralized point. They all wash their hands and they have a canteen snack waiting for them in their room when they get there. And the CITs are responsible for delivering snack, picking up snack. They rehydrate, hang out, and pick their next activity.
Have you
So-
run into with parents? Is it hard to train the parents that if they're going, okay, my child keeps picking art all the time, make them go somewhere else or whatever? It's getting their mindset switched too, that this is the child's decision.
Yeah, I always
Right.
tell parents, like, you pick our camp because we believe in your child and we believe in their competency in the world. And if you want a camp where they're just going to shuffle your child from place to place, you should pick a JCC, a YMCA, a Boys and Girls Club in a more traditional setting. But we don't offer that. So we do have children who get overstimulated by our program, and mom feels like they need to go someplace that's much more rigid. But in general, parents, once we explain to them our philosophy, they're like, I didn't even think about that. Like, my kid
Yeah.
does need autonomous choice in the world.
Right. I
Right.
think one way that I explain it, I tell them, and we don't do it exactly like you, but I say that it's very like middle school. And some kids are ready for middle school and some kids aren't.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Like if you're going into middle school, like that makes a whole lot of sense. But when you're used to being in an elementary school where you
You're
might be in
right.
just two different rooms the whole time, the parents, again, it's the parents that get
Yeah.
disconcerted by it.
I think the
Kids
kids
rise to the occasion.
probably love it, and then they do branch out. It might take them a little while, but I would think once they realize the sky's the limit, they're gonna try more things. And
Yeah.
Yes. It's like teaching them to take calculated risk. And I always tell parents, wherever they go, an adult is teaching them, the ratios are the same. It's like a win-win. And if they don't like it when they get back to their cabin, the counselors are like, how was your activity? What did you do? And I always tell this story that like when my son was younger, he's now going to actually be a first year counselor this summer. He went to yoga one day and he came back and he was like, that was awful. And the counselor's like, what was so bad about it? And he's like, did you know you have to stretch and be quiet in yoga? And they were like, but that's what yoga is. He's like, well, nobody told me. So it's like, okay, you try something, you don't like it. We'll have a conversation with you about like who you are, what you like, and how you might choose something differently, or how you might go again and try it out a second time. And I think in the world today, it's so helpful it's like little bits of resilience they're building. And it's good for the staff because the staff can be reflective and see, oh, I was that kind of kid that I didn't want to take risks. Or I was that kid that's like on the top of the water slide, jumping off the water slide.
I had one of my autistic guys, we got him to do a high ropes course, and he usually didn't branch out a lot with his activities. So afterwards, I'm like, that's awesome that you tried this. And he's like, one time.
Yeah.
That's it.
But you did
That's
it.
all you got. So, but it was like, well, yeah, you did it at least. So,
Yeah. So last year, I was fortunate to be able to spend time with Jonathan Haidt, the author who wrote he's The Anxious Generation. He's like the hot guy right now with all this. And I was explaining to him how we run our camp, and similar to in the city camp, the groups split up and they go to electives. Our camp, it's weekly electives, and they choose at home. So the parents do get a little bit involved in their choices, although we do let them switch once they go that first day on Monday. But when and we do free choice, so there's a lot of free play involved in my camp too, and he's very big on that. And so he was really excited about it. He said, how do you explain this to the parents? And I gave him a little song and dance about what I say. And he said, do you ever use the word risk? Because I love the fact, Eileen, that you said calculated risk. And I said, no, I don't actually. He said, use it because it's an important factor of why kids are entering like college and life and not adapted to risk because they're not taking risk. The parents are not putting them in risk situations, and they think risk is bad. And part of what you do at your camp is they are taking risk every single day, and all these little challenges and things that take courage. And you have to identify that and debrief that with them and explain that to their parents so that their parents are comfortable letting their kids just go out and play unsupervised and things like that.
Yeah,
Right?
totally.
I love that. So I love that.
I got my daughter to jump off of a like really high rock when she was young into the river. And she came up spitting mad and was like, how could you have thought that was okay for me to do? And she's lecturing me. And as she is, her brother runs back up to jump back off, and she follows him and does it again. But I got torn a new one for letting her try this. And she was fine.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
one of the cool things, your grandma, you could do it even more. You have this excuse. You're old and wise. So going back to how we started this thing, right? So you said you've gone from 60 kids that first year to 750, right? So so would you attribute it just to word of mouth that
Yeah,
got it to this
it's
point?
just been word of mouth
And-
because it's
and-
unique.
yeah. Oh yeah.
for-
You have identified a need and you're filling it for people 100%. And
Yeah.
that is how a business is run successfully. So then facility wise, what have you done over the years? Like Sam is on how many sites, Sam? 5 sites?
5.
Right? Like, to be able to have that many kids. How do you guys achieve that?
It's actually an interesting question you're asking because I used to be on 3 sites before the pandemic. We would be spread out. And what I found is we were creating community, but very micro communities.
Mm.
And it wasn't Atlanta is huge and the traffic is debilitating. Okay. And as somebody who grew up here, when I meet somebody, I'll be like, oh, where were you from? And there are certain parts of Atlanta they'll tell me they're from. I'm like, we don't know each other. I never went to your area. I didn't have any. And I feel like that's such a loss. And so we decided after the pandemic, for both financial reasons and because we wanted to meet the moment of mental health needs and physical needs and this anti-Semitism and security needs, that we would consolidate onto one campus. But now we've gotten so big, we're having a hard time finding space. So this summer, we're back at our location we were at last summer, but we're not going to be able to return. We're too big. So it's something we're discussing. Do we split back up into 2 locations? Do we find something on the outside of town? Like, what do we do? But for now, I'm excited about this last summer in this space that we've totally outgrown and that we take over. But it is like, feels amazing and full of life and camp and all the things. But yeah, I mean, like, it is a problem. It's
You
a
seem
lot of
pretty
people.
undaunted and smiley for somebody with this predicament in front of you.
Yeah. I think if we had talked like 2 weeks ago, I might not have been as smiley about it, but like, I feel like I've put a plan in place. But I just think the power of camp is too great for us to like get barriers to have. I just don't see the barriers as like an issue. I see them as like something to walk through, but like the world needs camp.
We
So
I
we
don't
had
have
the
to convince
same
y'all.
we had
Yeah.
the same dilemma in the beginning about how to keep the sites from siloing and
Yeah.
not being one camp. So we are at the lake all together in the morning
Oh, nice.
before the public comes in. But by noon, they want us out because the whole city's coming to the lake
Right.
and they need us out of there. So we do find the community in the morning and then silo back out in the
Yeah,
afternoon.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source for recreation solutions that will help ensure that your camp thrives this summer. Check out their inflatable aquapark courses for pools or lakes, the prime carts, the cool little go-kart things, the emergency alert and lightning detection systems. Whoa, the splash pads. Whoa, if you got the money for that, splash pads is the way to go with the heat we got. The Zoom Flume, a lot less money, and cool, talk about the most awesome water slip and slides that you could possibly get. The jumpers, okay, for bouncing all around the place. Mini golf, the prefab cabins and pavilions and bathrooms, the shade structures. Lord, do we need shade structures these days? The shade structures cannot be beat. And of course, the playgrounds, including the ones with the cool musical components. Anyway, CRS Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source. Explore their website today at crs4rec.com because CRS is serious about fun.
So if you were to put in the city into a box and be able to sell
Yeah.
it to somebody in Asheville, okay,
Yeah.
where would you suggest for people to start reaching out to be able to run their camps? Where's the low-hanging fruit?
Okay. I think an ideal place for this type of camp is a smaller community, a place that needs a camp, high quality, not overly expensive. Our price point's at 500. I mean, it would depend what city, but my dream always was to franchise this, to say like, we'll think of everything. We'll ship you a box every
Yeah,
Monday.
you got the
We'll, you know,
name. You got it.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and the camp can start with 60 kids. It can break even
Yeah.
at 60 kids. So it's kind of, yeah, it's like we're at like this new juncture of like, where do we go? How do we do it? But I think a smaller city is kind of the ideal. People who want to build community with children and young adults in a city that has a park rec area, a public
Right. But
school.
I'm saying things like state, county, city parks, right? Colleges, like places
Yeah,
like that.
universities are great. Yeah. Boarding
Yeah.
schools are great. Even a public school.
And Sam and I, like, our camps are like, she's probably 90% outside. I'm like 100% outside. But again, it's not 105 degrees every single day
Yeah.
either, right? So I totally get it from your situation. But if you were in a more northern area where it was a little more temperate, then parks
You could
are even
easily
better.
be outside.
Yeah.
Easily. A park rec where there's access to water, restrooms, you know, all the stuff. And in a heartbeat, you could run this
Mhm.
camp.
And then you talk to the powers that be and you try to get a 2-year contract, a 5-year contract, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. My advice to anybody, if you're going to do this, is try to solidify a minimum of a 3-year contract. Because when I look back on our success, it did take 3 years to really build up enough staff and enough campers. And we've not really been able to find a long-term contract really because of our excessive growth, which is like a catch-22. You're like, you really want to grow, but then we got so big, we don't know what to do. So it's a good problem, but a legit problem.
Yeah. So what kind of obstacles did you hit along the way in those first few
So
years?
our biggest issue was that we were the university. Once Emory kind of asked us to move off campus, the biggest obstacle we had was competition. That people didn't want to rent to us
Right.
because the YMCA is down the street and they
Yeah.
partner with the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club,
Yeah.
and they
I
don't
mean, the
want to get
fact
the
is most
politics.
colleges have summer enrichment programs, right?
That's why Emory asked us to depart, because
Yeah.
their coaches were training athletes and they were like, you're in our way. So that was really the politics, and the competition have continued to be our biggest hurdles.
So this past year, this wonderful year you just had, where were you?
Yeah. We were at a private school, kind of in the middle of Atlanta. So no matter where you're coming from, north, south, either east or west, the highway kind of spits you out right
Yeah.
about a
And you
mile
just
away from our
took it
school.
over, I guess. Jeez.
We did, and that's what they told us already. They're like, you've taken us over. You can't come back because you're too many people. So yeah, we're looking, I don't know, like maybe we'll continue to look and even buy a property, but it is an issue with global warming, especially in the South, between the rain and the heat and the humidity. It's dangerous. So we want the children to be outside and build resilience in heat. That's critical. Like, can't
Yeah.
always be in air condition, but we also have to really honor the safety. And so that's something we're continuing really to struggle with. And hopefully we'll there's a whole committee working on it now, but it's been an issue.
Wow. You have your hands full.
Finding.
Now, you say committee. Are you nonprofit or are you private?
So we, in the end, decided to go nonprofit a couple of years ago. We did that because we had funders who wanted to support our work through scholarship. And the best and easiest way to do it was we just became a nonprofit, and now we have a robust board. And especially because we're an independent nonprofit camp with nothing to fall back on, like a parent organization, the YMCA, Boys and Girls, JCC, et cetera, we really had to build up a robust board to help us make sure everything is not only above board, but also so that we can make sure every child can afford camp. And that's something I really take a lot of pride in, that when you look around our camp, it's not a homogeneous environment.
Mhm.
It's an environment with diversity, and it's good.
So how did you go about doing that? Being able to subsidize
Well, for a long time, we were just subsidizing from our bottom
out of the
line.
kindness of your heart, right?
Yeah, and that became an unsustainable. Like,
Yeah.
my husband's always like, it's so nice, you're so nice, but you're not making any money.
Yeah.
So I had worked at the Marcus Foundation, so we have a great relationship with them. And there's lots of other incredible funders here who support our work through scholarship. So again, that's also word of mouth. It's on the website. And when we send out emails at the bottom, it always says, if you let us help you make camp affordable. But some money always goes pretty quickly. And to families who really need it, families who
Sure.
really can't afford childcare, but desperately need it in the summer. And I like that our kids who can't afford it and who are affluent are stepping out of their bubble and meeting other kids. That's really a part of camp and a part of growth that we don't always get to see, but it is like critical to the future of the world.
And
Yes.
I think every state has some state aid programs that, being a nonprofit, you should be able to qualify for.
Eligible for, yeah.
It's a lot of paperwork to get
Yeah.
that first in, but once you do, then you end up with so many children that you might not have been able to serve otherwise, that
Yeah,
they're
that's a good
helping you
point.
serve.
Yeah,
So
because the private camp, we had to form a nonprofit in order to raise monies to send kids to our camp and other camps in our area. So,
Yeah.
so let's say I'm a family and I'm interested in sending my kids to your camp, but I can't afford the regular rack rate. How do you direct them at that point?
Okay, when you go and you apply to send your child to camp, you pay $100 non-refundable deposit, meaning like, I really want this to work out for
Yeah.
my children. And then we have all the paperwork you fill out. We do try to make it easier on families, because when you're only applying for 4 or 8 weeks, like, you don't want to spend hours on filling out paperwork. And I also want people to feel dignified about our process. So we have a third party that does it, but that discusses it with us. When I get the information, just to give the yay or nay, it doesn't have any names on it. It just has the data already determined by the third party and curated by my staff. I will say we 90% give people what they ask for, because we say in the application, like, ask us for what you really need and we will try to honor it. And that has created a nice relationship with our families. So we don't have people like trying to take advantage of us or abusing the system. And then we always save some money aside because we know the families that said, we're just going to go for 2 weeks. We can only afford X amount. Once their child is so happy, they'll come back and we'll try to match the rate or at least give them a little bit so they can stay at camp.
Right. Well, also, once they come to your camp and if they see true value in it, they may value it more and be more willing
Exactly.
to put more money in themselves. So
Yeah.
for this third party, I find this intriguing. Like, what are they doing? Like, who are these people? What are they doing?
It's basically a third party of a committee that I have
Uh-huh.
nothing to do with,
Okay.
and one of the people on our staff deals with
Mhm.
them, and they're just also taking the data. And we always have the families write, like, why should we give you the money? Why do you need it? Where else are you sending your kids in the summer? All the data.
Mhm.
And I find the committee to be like really generous and kind and also honest. Like every once in a while, somebody with an exorbitant income applies and says, like, we're building a house and we can't afford camp. And it's
Mhm.
like, my committee's like, no. But most of the time, 90% of the time, it's really, they ask and we're able to honor it. But again, we're a new camp. We started with these like very strict rules of how we're going to do it. And we've kind of trained our families along the way about the process. So when I hear people in the community talking about the process, they're like, applied it in the city. They're really kind and generous. And we're not generous to a fault. We want children in camp because that's what's
Mhm.
best for the society we live in.
And now this bucket of money that you're giving these scholarships, camperships, with,
Yeah.
are you raising money for that throughout the year? Are you doing events? Are you
Yes.
doing anything?
Right now we do some very small events, but really we're funded through the community foundation, some of the larger funders, and all the money goes to scholarship. That's really what we need our money for. And it's true, most families are not making enough to send their kids to a full summer of camp. We're not the YMCA. We're not $150 or $200 a
Well,
week.
not just that, the YMCA and the JCCs are having dinners and golf tournaments and all this kind of thing to raise
Yes.
hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? We're these independent camps. It's like we really don't have the time and effort or manpower to do these kind of things.
I definitely don't have the manpower for that. And I'd rather take our time and put it towards building our community in the summer and
Yes.
stewarding staff and everything like that.
Right.
So,
Right. On a good program.
yeah, that's really what we're passionate about. And I find that as we continue to grow, donors are very, very generous because they see what happens long term. And it's always so amazing when I see a kid who's come through our system on scholarship, but then works for us. It's like, okay, it worked. Like we cultivated them and now they're able to give back to our community and make money. So I love that.
All right. I got another question. City, like being in the city, right?
Yes.
What, besides the traffic, what are some of the other unique aspects for the people listening of what an urban camp has to deal with?
Okay, so there's the urban camp before the pandemic is a different urban camp after the pandemic because the child and the counselors have changed due to the pandemic. But before the pandemic,
Wait. Explain that. Explain that.
okay. So the kids who we see coming into the system, into our camp, were all born in the pandemic. And so they are not as adventurous. They have a lot of anxiety, everything everybody's saying. And
Mhm.
their parents have always been on top of them. So in contrast to like the older days with like me and my kids, it's like just take them and make sure they come back safe. Whatever you do is great. So before the pandemic, everybody had a MARTA card, a bus card. We would go downtown. We would go on adventures. Depending on what age you were, you would walk down to the coffee shop with your bunk if that was one of the activities. We can't do that anymore. We really have to stay on campus unless we're taking the older kids off campus to volunteer. But in the city really now more means that it's like a convenient location for everybody to gather because it's like right in the middle. And it allows us to bring people from all over Atlanta who normally don't meet each other. They can, because it's a central place in the city, that's more what it means now. In the past, it meant like running a city camp where you would like walk around and go explore and see the museums. But post pandemic, it's not like that.
It's interesting. You might be able to slowly get it back towards there if you want it.
Yeah, slowly. Like we used to have 2 field trips a week where we would take like 6 buses or 7 buses of
That's a
kids and
lot.
staff, and we just like show up at the aquarium, show up at Six Flags, and like I just can't imagine how the overstimulation. So we have started this summer. We did some with our middle schoolers doing some of that. But again, they also were impacted by the pandemic and they're not as adventurous. So
Mhm.
trying to create experiences for them
Well,
on campus.
from your
Yeah.
from your perspective, also as the operator, I mean, it costs a lot to put them on 6 buses and send them to Six Flags.
It does
Let's be
now.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it didn't in the day. Like when I think back to how it was before the pandemic, it was like affordable to do those things. It
Really?
wasn't crazy. Yeah, it wasn't crazy.
We
I
have
would
a
rent out-
Chicago
ahead.
Park District that used to do the camp you were describing before the pandemic. They would meet at a Starbucks with teen camp and get on the train.
Yeah.
And go wherever. And that was their whole camp. They'd come back to Starbucks, parents would pick them up.
Oh my God, what a cool
Yeah.
thing.
It was
Yeah.
cool. So I tried to replicate that and I'm like, okay, I'm going out into the country from my city. I'm a little scared to go into the city. But the next town over had a theater that was walking distance from the train station. So then I would get the teen campers on, do the short little jaunt to the next town, do a field trip and get back on. But yes, it was way easier before the
Yeah.
pandemic. So
All right. Got one last big question. It's an involved thing, Bailey, because you should feel honored being on this Day Camp podcast as one of the
I
few
am.
faith-based camps that we've ever had. Right? There's
Oh,
only been a few.
wow.
It's only been a few.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that we touch on that because I think it's super important. So whatever your, religion is, like, so how did you have such a cool camp and such a cool camp model, and you're teaching Judaism aspects,
Yes.
cultural or whatever in there. So tell us your philosophy on that and how you guys do that.
Okay. So the philosophy is that there's lots of camps in Atlanta. Okay. There's a lot of camps here, but there wasn't a Jewish camp that wasn't religious and didn't have religion in the camp. So I wanted to create a camp that was culturally
By
connected
the
to
way,
Judaism.
there's not one in Philadelphia either. If you
I see a
want
potential.
to talk, okay?
All right, let's talk. And I wanted for my own children and for my friends' kids to be able to be exposed to what is Judaism, what is our culture, what is our history, without there having to be religion in it. And so I always tell people, you're Jewish, you're not Jewish, come join us. Do you want your kid to be a good person? We're definitely the camp for you.
Right.
We hire role model counselors, which I'm sure, Andy, you feel very, very passionate about, that like whoever we're going to put in front of your child is the kind of role model you want for your child. So that's another way you see our deep commitment to like culture and kindness and Judaism, right? Like that's who we are as a people, like people who are passing down traditions in ways that should make sense to the next generation and should be inviting and not scary. So
Cute fiddler on the
it's-
roof. Cute fiddler.
Yeah.
Right. Good
so
stuff.
like I just kind of say it's like it's joyous Judaism is what I say. Like when you're there, it's like everybody is so prideful, and even the people who are not Jewish are like, "I'll learn the Hebrew song. That sounds like a fun thing to learn." And what's cool about it is like because we are based in being good people, like our whole theme of the summer is Tikkun Olam, which in English means repairing the world. That is the lens in which we do everything. So families are always shocked how welcoming we are, but we're just welcoming because those are the core values of who we are. And it definitely differentiates us from everybody else, right? Because most places you're going are kind of doing their best, and it's not steeped in values of tradition and kindness and repairing the world. And
So how
the
do
way
I
we
know
do
when I come to your camp and I'm a kid, I'm an 8-year-old kid, how do I know? Like how am I seeing this?
Okay,
How am I getting
everything we do has a Hebrew word to it. So like you're starting to learn a lot of Hebrew language, right? The language of the Jewish people is Hebrew. So that's one thing. Every activity has an element of Judaism in it. If you're cooking Jewish food and talking about it. If you're playing basketball, you're talking about the Maccabiah games and what are those? And how do you say all these words in Hebrew? A lot of our staff has are Jewish and tell their Jewish stories of like, oh my gosh, when I was in Israel, or I went on this teen tour, or I did this. So just like making Judaism cool. I always say to my staff, if you make it cool, they'll want to do it, right? Like children just want to be like their counselors. And I feel confident that our counselors are role models. So I don't have to.
Such a true
Yeah.
statement.
Worry about that. In art, they're making Jewish inspired art. They're learning about different Jewish artists who have influenced secular artists and talking about that. So we're not just like you're going to art and you're making a bracelet. You're going to art and you're talking about your name and what your name means to you and how your parents gave you your name, Jewish or non-Jewish. Everybody has a story, right? And then like saying, would you like to make a bracelet in Hebrew with your Hebrew name, right? So like the staff is very engaged in that and think it's cool. And so the kids are like thinking it's cool. And also, I'm always encouraging my staff to think of cool activities. So last year, the activity they thought of in Israel, the cafe, like going to a cafe and having coffee is like a very cultural common thing there. So the staff taught the kids how to make different like barista drinks. And they opened a cafe and the kids would come, they'd order, they'd practice their Hebrew. And then they'd sit and have conversations about like Jewish things while they're sipping their coffee in the cafe in Tel Aviv. So like very cute, clever, and like accessible. And that's really our thing. We want to be accessible to all families.
I like the approach. I like the
That's
approach.
fun.
It's not like I'm going to Hebrew school on Sunday or
No,
whatever. And you know what I mean? Like
no.
right. It's sort of the antithesis to that. And yeah, a lot more palatable. And like I say, trying to make it cool, trying to keep it cool. I think
Yeah.
that's super. And by the way, the
Yeah.
cafe thing, shout out to the JCC in Medford down the road from me who did something like that and actually had their special needs kids, their older special needs kids running it.
Oh, I love
And
that.
it was very successful from what I heard. And
Oh,
shout out
that's
to Aaron
awesome.
Greenberg, who used to run that program,
Woo! Go,
who
Aaron.
put us in touch with Eileen here. And we're going to have him on and talk about his Jewish Day Camp Network sometime real soon. Sam, you got any questions for Eileen before we let her go?
No, that's amazing. Everything is so well thought out and planned and proactive, and you're dealing with things as they come and like a champ. So no, it's very
Thank you.
interesting.
Honored to
Yeah,
be
and
included in such good company.
and good luck finding these
Thank you.
the next destinations for you. And yeah, I mean, with that many kids, I would definitely think of like older kids, younger kids is what I'm sort of thinking.
Yeah.
To be realistic, but it is so nice. You're 100% right. Like it is so nice having everybody be on one spot.
When I think about like the Jewish concept of Lador Vador, like from generation to generation, it's critical that everybody's together to understand how what that means.
Yeah,
And
the
so
little
I'm
kids look up
hesitant.
to the big kids. The big
Yes,
kids like taking care of the little kids.
they
Like
do. And if
that's
I
part
like
of
don't
camp.
have that, it kind of like, oh, it hurts
Yeah,
me.
it's
So
correct.
anyway, I gave it to a committee to figure out because I'm too emotionally connected to it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of power in intergenerational relationships. And even all the time, I'll be out and I'll see somebody be wearing an End the City Camp shirt. And then
Mhm.
I'll see a counselor be like, wait, do you remember me from 2 summers ago? And like that usually only happens at overnight camp, but it happens here all the time because of our day camp. And I find that to be like part of our magic.
Yeah.
What about that ridiculously giant convention center where they film the Marvel movies now? You can't get part of that? Thing's
Oh, I
huge.
don't know. That thing
You know
is
what I'm talking
huge.
about? That place is
Mm,
monstrous. That's like
I
I've been
know.
walking through there. You can get lost in there. It's so big.
I know. It's a little scary in there, but yeah,
Yeah.
we'll
All right.
see.
Well,
We'll see.
thank you,
Thank you
Eileen.
so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
y'all.
Oh, you're welcome. And then we want to thank our friends at Campminder and Camptivities and Commercial Recreation Specialists for helping bring this podcast to you. And if you like what you hear, you should subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. So check out the show notes from all our episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact info for the show, for Eileen Price and the In the City Camps, and for myself and for my co-host, Sam Thompson. So thank you for listening and making yourself a better Day Camp Pro. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Day Camp Pod.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by Go Camp Pro and the Go Camp Pro Podcast Network. Find a podcast for camp professionals of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Thanks for listening, friends. Hey, Camp Pros, we love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, we hope that whenever you share an idea that you learned from the Camp Hacker podcast, conference, summer camp professionals group, or wherever else, that you're quick to give credit where credit is due. That way, we can all encourage more camp pros to share the tips and tricks that will make camp better.